We are 50 miles from Cape Kennedy, where all different types of people, different ethnicities, different countries, different cultures have been set into space. Many of them have beliefs prior to going in. Most of them, I would say, are scientists. Some are teachers. What have you found, or what have you learned, or what do you know about how their lives have changed, either circling the moon, coming back, or going around the earth, from now their perspective and view there versus when they were growing up here on their beliefs about God, the universe, science, faith, etc.?
I'd love to talk to that, but you could too.
No, go ahead, because
I've spoken to several of these astronauts, and what's interesting is so many of them became mystics up there. And of course, many of them were fighter pilots and all these other things. But what they told me was two things made them mystics up there. One was the silence, and the other was the darkness. See, the via negativa. And then, of course, we've all seen the picture, looking into the darkness, but seeing this one shining gem where everything he loved, all of history, was centered, you know. And so I figured it out once. What does it cost to send a jet pilot up into space to come back a mystic? And I jotted out the numbers. It seemed like about $42 million each time. I said, there has to be a cheaper way of making men into mystics. Now, it's not just the astronauts. The cosmonauts, too, out of Russia have had the same experiences. But when they return, you know, NASA does not have a spiritual director on the faculty. So some of them go crazy and run for political office and other crazy things, you know. So I mean it though. I mean, they come back having had a mystical experience, and it's not in their training or even in their landing as what to do with it. And now, but I'm so glad you raised the question, and as you say, within 50 miles of the shooting place, because I want to tell a story about Thomas Merton. You know, Merton died in 1968, and the big technological shouting of the 60s was, we're going to the moon, we're going to the moon. And of course, they landed in 69 after he had died. Merton was maybe the only one in the country who raised questions about going to the moon. He said, even ants can fly. Even ants can fly. He said that we're going to go to the moon, we're going to go to other planets, but if we do not deal with the harder work, the harder discovery is the inner discovery of the human. We will just bring our violence, you're talking about, and I would say our extended reptilian brain to further places. And he put it so brilliantly, you know, because he can write so well. Would you mind? You can talk to this now while I dig this out. It's so beautiful. And but what he's calling for is what he's really calling for is a comparable. He was a naysayer about turning.
Yes, Father. It's
120. He says, even if we can fly, so what? There are flying ants. Even if humans fly all over the universe, we are still nothing but a flying ant until we recover a human center and a human spirit in the depth of our own being. What can be gained by sailing to the moon if we are not able to cross the abyss that separates us from ourselves? This is the most important of all voyages of discovery. And without it, all the rest are not only useless, but disastrous. I think that he's really onto something. Mm-hmm. And we put all this money since 1960s and today into more and more shots, and now we're talking about, you know, Mars and all the rest. But what effort do we put into exploring the inner depths of the human consciousness, you see? And for example, how much money goes into Well, now we have some scientists studying things like meditation and all that as a baby step. But I think he's absolutely right in this sense, not that it's either or, but that we should also be putting our passion for discovery into this big world, which is the human consciousness, the human soul, with its violence, its shadow, its capacity for evil, but also its capacity for brilliance and joy and love and community and all that. So I think that your question, what can I say, it triggers my bringing Thomas Merton into the room. Thank you.
I think that's a great point, but I don't think that's precisely the thing. We don't want to discover inward. We're afraid of what we would find.
Exactly.
It's much easier to get up the money and send ourselves to the moon because it's much more measurable, controllable, and visible. And so the very thing that can...
And television, too. It does good on television.
And it does fabulous on television. I mean, how would you possibly create a TV show on the human heart, on what you're going to find within? I think there's lions and tigers and bears, oh my, within us. Mm-hmm. It's the whole Wizard of Oz within us, the witches within us, right? The gods within us. So I think we're afraid of our own inner selves.
I agree 100%.
And that's why we don't make this we don't spend a lot of time there. Mm-hmm. We want to kind of forget. Sort of a type of forgetfulness that we have an inner self, and we keep extrinsicizing, you might say, what we are, and hoping we can discover what will satisfy the inner self. Yeah. Precisely in this outer
projection,
journey,
really.
In this projection.
Yes, I agree 110%.
Oh, thank God.
Thank you.
I took a chance. No.
First, I want to thank both of you very much for your work. I know many people that have really, their sanity has been saved because of the work of both of you individually, and thank you. And this, of course, their spirituality. How do you individually deal with cynicism? Because both of you have confronted a lot of darkness, whether it be in religious institutions or the world in general. How do you individually avoid cynicism? How do you sustain yourself?
Mm-hmm.
You become a cynic. No.
I'm sorry.
I said you become a cynic. Oh. No. No. It's a great question, Bill, because there's a lot of, really, you can go either way, right? You can be cynical. You can get down on all this stuff and become wrapped up in what I call negative energy. I think negative energy is such a downward spiral, it unravels us. And so, I can't tell you Matt has his own story, but I've just learned to let go of a lot of stuff. And it must be an act of grace because I simply live in the present moment. I can hardly remember too much of yesterday. I don't remember what anyone said or I kind of do, but I don't let it emotionally affect me because I don't let my emotions take it in and, sit with it forever and ever. I'm such a future-oriented, I'm present into future. I'm all about creativity in this present moment. There's too many good things happening in this moment to be weighed down by the cynical. Religious life, by the way, when you're living with a lot of people you're not related to, really. There are just no words to really describe. So I think that little lesson of living with, a lot of women that I'm like, these women are really out of their minds, You learn to love them. You learn to love in and through the darkness and the difficulties of the fragile human person. We are fragile creatures, constantly, in a sense, trying to, stake ourselves out or assert ourselves over another, or, academia is full of, I'm so brilliant, don't you realize this, or, all this stuff of the fragile human person. And I think I've just learned to love the persons, in their own fragility. And not, and I don't let myself get sucked up by what may happen if the Vatican calls me up and says, don't write anymore. And I'm really going to go, oh, really? Really? why worry? You know, we worry too much, actually. We worry entirely too much about what they're going to say, what they're going to do to us. Are they going to throw me out? Oh, thank God, you know, that I can finally get a rest, quite honestly, because it's been a lot of work. So I truly don't worry. I really, really believe there is one other that I name as God, who is compassion and love and is the heart of this life. And this God I lean on 100%. And that's why I really don't let any of the darkness weigh me down. I see it. I see the dark side of people. I myself can feel when I'm moving in that direction, and I pull myself back in, and I keep going on this journey of life because it's moving toward more life. Matt, you have your own side of this story.
What's that?
You have your own side of the story.
Well, you know, I remember Rabbi Heschel said that he learned early never to deal with his kudus because life is short. And he got so much abuse from his own community when he marched with King in the South and everything that the Jewish community did not support him. They felt there's enough anti-Semitism without you stirring up the segregation issue in the South. And so he just didn't respond. Like you, he didn't want to take time and energy for that. So that's part of it, I think, that you want to parcel your energy into what really matters and what your real calling is. But of course, cynicism is a lot like despair, and it's a lot like pessimism. And of course, there's a lot of it in the air, especially at this time. But it's kind of like what you're talking about from an evolutionary point of view. You know, things are breaking down, but things are also breaking through, and new shoots are happening, and all that. One of my favorite stories I got from cosmologist Brian Swim. He put it this way. He said, you know, when humans discovered fire and left the African continent about 65,000 years ago or so, and we went wandering. And when we landed in what is today Eurasia, the Ice Age hit. Now just think about that. We've just emerged from the savannas of Africa, and the Ice Age hits. I presume the first 1,000 years, people were yelling at each other, who turned off the lights, you know, who turned off the heat. But meanwhile, we had a hustle. We really had a hustle. We had to learn how to kill a woolly mammoth and skin it. We had to learn how to live in caves and tell stories over the fire and keep the wild-toothed saber tigers at a distance. I mean, there was a lot going on. These are our ancestors. These are our ancestors. They were tough. They were resilient. They were creative. And they didn't sit around feeling sorry for themselves or becoming cynical. They were in a battle to survive. Now, patriarchy, by definition, is full of self-pity. Why is it full of self-pity? Because it kills the mother principle in men and tries to do it in women. And that's why it does not encourage creativity. As Jung says, creativity comes from the realm of the mothers. So you have to distance yourself from patriarchy so you don't fall into that self-pity, woe is me, and cynicism that goes with it, attitude. And you know, we have to use our left brains to analyze this and figure it out, what's really going on. But, you know, the word cynicism means to bark like a dog. And I love dogs. My dog doesn't bark that much, actually. But the point is, you have a choice. You can choose to bark your way through life, or you can choose to rejoice and look for the praise, the things to praise. Meister Eckhart says, who is a good person? He says, a good person praises good people. To me, and I've tried that out for about 25 years, it's an amazingly practical trick. If you are a good person and you praise good people, that means you are a hunter-gatherer looking for goodness. Mm-hmm. Cynics are not. Cynics have their worldview baked. They're there pouting and feeling sorry for themselves. Yeah. And paranoid as hell. So we have choices. And one of the choices is to go looking for goodness, looking for praise. Rabbi Heschel says, praise precedes faith. Praise precedes faith. Have we forgotten how to praise? Have we forgotten how to go hunting, gathering for goodness, for praise? Wherever there is goodness, there is God. Julian Norwitz says, God is goodness. So I think that a spiritual life is the medicine for the temptation. Because we are tempted in times like this by despair, by cynicism. And certainly because we live in a patriarchal context. So we have to make an effort. Spirituality is not about tiptoeing through the tulips. You know, it's the work of warriors. It takes courage. That warrior energy has to come forward, especially at this time in history. And the warrior is far too busy to sit around being cynical. I'll end with this great poem from Hafiz, the Sufi mystic, who was a contemporary of Meister Eckhart, early 14th century, if I can remember it. He says, sometimes God wants to do us a great big favor, turn us upside down and shake all the nonsense out. But most everyone I know, when they find God is in such a playful, drunken mood, quickly pack their bags and hightail it out of town. In other words, the via negativa, the first response is, let's get out of town for the via negativa. But no, the mystics say, stick around. God is playing with us. There's a trickster in the room. And in the context, we're going to become more whole, more free, more playful, more young, more joyful, more creative. And creativity, I think, is the ultimate answer to cynicism.
If I can just add, Eric Youngs, the system specialist, said very simply, to live with an evolutionary spirit is to let go when the right time comes and to engage in new structures of relationship. And I think, you know, all of this, I mean, Matt takes the path through the mystics. It's really living with a whole new consciousness of an evolutionary spirit. Or to put it in the words of Bruce Springsteen, what you don't surrender, the world just strips away, you know. So I think, or to the AA adage, let go, let God. You know, there's a sense of a playfulness in the letting go and the creativity of the ever ongoing process of new life.
Thank you. And thanks for quoting Eric Jansch. I love that guy's work.
Yeah.
One of his lines is Jantzsch.
Jantzsch, yeah. Jansch.
One of his lines I love, he says, God is the mind of the universe. And then he says, now mystics have been saying that for centuries, but now that I say it as a scientist, people are going to listen.
Yes. He was
so
great,
that's
actually.
the plus you have going for you, see,
Yeah.
that as a scientist, more people listen in our culture.
Yeah.
But that's what's so wonderful, this
thought it's 'cause I'm a
convergence, the
woman,
coming
too.
together
Yeah.
of the wisdom of science and the wisdom of the mystics. Yeah. And what did you say about being-
Franciscan, you know.
Pardon me?
I thought it was because I'm Franciscan that I had a little, you know, edge here of being listened to.
Oh, well, that's an illusion. You're listened to because you're a scientist
This is an
and you're a
age-old
woman
battle,
scientist.
by the way, between...
And you're a woman scientist, and people want to hear women scientists who can also talk theology. So I don't want to look backwards. I want to look forwards to your
I'm a serious
vocation.
sports person. You want